Hey guys, Philosopher here, and today I am going to be unveiling my Weapon X infographic. I'm going to go through all the T4s. I'm going to go through the ISO classes, the positioning, the gear order, all that stuff. And I know this has been a long time coming. I got married this last month, and also Punk was working on this badass look for this thing. I think he did a really nice job, so thank you to Punk, who makes all my infographics. Did a really nice job with this. I will just say, guys, this was not easy to do. This was not easy to do at all. In fact, it may have been the most challenging one I've ever done, and there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, there is a lot of abilities on this team that are bleed abilities. This is a team that is full of abilities that apply bleeds. And whenever you have a bleed ability, my instinct is always to make sure it has a T4 because the game doesn't tell you this. But whenever you have an ability that, like, see, this one applies bleeds, whenever you have that ability T4'd, it has a higher damage multiplier than when you don't have it T4'd. And so my instinct is like, hey, let's just T4 all this stuff, right? But that's not practical for most people. I've also heard from a lot of you. I'm actually moving this up the queue a little bit. I had some other things in the works. I've got my DD5 infographic coming out soon. But, a lot of you were waiting on this one, but I really wanted to get it right. And I know in my absence, there's been all sorts of infographics, floating around. I just don't think that they're right. I've spent quite a long time thinking about this one, and also just I've obviously played with the team a lot at this point. I have a very good understanding, I think, of how it works. So let's just get right into it, and I'm going to show you where what I think the essential T4s are. So let me just go right to it. And the first most essential T4 to me is Omega Red's ultimate. Now, I know that some of you might say, well, wait, what about his, for example, hey, Philosopher, I think the passive is more important. For example, let's say, getting an additional max health on the team. I think this team ultimately, at least at this stage, and this is a video, I'm sure the T4 priorities may change, many months from now if this team is super power crapped. But right now, what this team needs to do more than anything is it needs to flip all the positive effects on the enemy. And that only happens when you have the T4. I mean, that ultimate ability is just an absolute game changer finisher for that team. And if you don't flip, all of those positive effects, I just don't think the team works nearly as well. To me, this, against teams like Heroes for Hire, they rely so much on positive effects that this one move totally decimates the opposing team. Now, I will say that I've heard from a lot of you who said that, hey, Philosopher, I've only put, a few T4s here on the team, or I've only, put T4s on these two characters, and I'm doing okay. And one thing I will just say to you guys is this team does very, very well against Heroes for Hire. It's like such a hard counter. And I know a lot of you talk to me about, one of the big subjects that comes up is like if your Omega Red has more health than your Sabretooth, then Omega Red gets ability blocked. And I will just tell you that even if that's the case, you still beat Heroes for Hire. I know it's a little harder because you have to basic instead of using, you have to wait another turn to use the ultimate. But even without it, this team is so good as long as you just have to pay a little more attention. Whereas if Omega Red is not the biggest, if Sabretooth is the biggest, like he is in my team, then it's just like literally pressing buttons. I don't know how I could lose against Heroes for Hire, but I will say one way I think I would give Heroes for Hire a chance is if I couldn't flip all positive effects to negative effects. So that one to me is the absolute number one ability. And so that's why it's first in the list. I just think it is so core to how this team functions and how this team has easy matchups. All right. The second one I have on his list in terms of essential T4s is the passive, because getting, additional max health is really important. Now it says 30 here, but it's actually, it's 20% max health. It's just an additional 10% max health. But then it also lowers enemy damage by, if you look at it, it lowers enemy damage by 15%. that I think is very helpful as well. So just the survivability of it, it helps with longer fights. I do think in the long run, this one will matter more for this team when it's not so overwhelming. When the team is more power crept, I do think that is going to matter more. All right, let's go back to the infographic and look at the third one on the list. The third most essential the T4 here is the Wolverine Special. Now, why the Wolverine Special? Well, a couple reasons. First of all, the Wolverine Special means that instead of rebounding, so it's a rebound chain, and instead of rebounding to 3 to 4 enemies, it rebounds to 5 enemies. So, if you're going from 3 enemies to 5 enemies, because it's a rebound chain, so if there's 2 characters, unless you're fighting a single character, if you're fighting at least 2 characters, as long as there's 2 characters next to each other, this attack will just ping pong between those 2 characters back and forth. So you have 2 enemies, it just goes back and forth, and going from, let's say, 3 enemies attack to 5 is massive, right? It is, let's see. I'm bad at math. Okay. That's why when it's not 100% larger, but it's like 66% more total damage, right? Because you're hitting 2 more times. In addition to that, you go from 100% piercing to, you get an extra 50% piercing to the primary target, an extra 20% in the secondary targets. And this is an ability that applies to bleed, so you get that higher damage multiplier. To me, this is also, this is going to be your turn 1 attack, right, by Wolverine. So to me, I just think you're going to want to get those bleeds ticking ASAP. Against Heroes for Hire, it helps getting all these bleeds out there because it just gets their health so low, and then when you apply trauma, you have the trauma there, they're not going to be healing when they lose those charges, which is basically how this team combats the enemy team. But I will just say, against any team, this is just a humongous damage boost for the team. So I view it as essential. Now, one thing I will just say, you're going to see here a bunch of abilities here in the 3 to 7 range that, you may say, well, these are just damage, Philosopher. Like how important are these abilities that are just damage? And the reality is, part of what makes this team so overwhelming is the damage that they do. Okay. And to me, it's these huge bleeds that they put on the enemy combined with trauma. All right. And combined with the flip that Omega Red does, that makes this team so good. I actually think, I really debated whether even to put these Silver Samurai abilities even in Essential T4s, because I don't really see him being the one doing most of the work for this team. Okay. So let's go now. The number 4 one on the list, the Sabretooth Ultimate. It's a similar sort of thing where the Sabretooth Ultimate, this is going to be your initial attack. And instead of going from 3 to 5 targets, it goes from 5 to 6. And that's a huge increase, right? Your expected number here is 4, and you go from 4 to 5.5 is the expected number of targets here. And by the way, if there's 2 enemies back, all you need is 2 enemies next to each other for this to be, hitting 5.5 times. So if you go from, let's see, 4, if you go from 4 to 5.5, that's a total, let's see here. I'm bad at math. That's a 37.5% total damage increase, which is much higher than just saying, oh, you're going from, an extra 50% damage. It's of the total. So it's of 380%. Okay. And then on top of that, of course, it gives you an extra 50% damage in the primary, an extra 30% damage in the secondary. So the amount of total damage that's being increased here by the number of targets is just much, much, much higher than your typical ability. And then, by the way, this is a bleed ability, and so you're going to get a higher damage multiplier. So I just think if you don't T4 these abilities, you're losing out on a ton of the damage of this team. And I do see people ask me, like, how do you, I'm having trouble with the Weapon X versus Heroes for Hire matchup. It may just be like you haven't, you don't have some of the sort of core T4s for the team. Because I just think that this is where this team does all the damage, is with these bleeds that can't be removed due to trauma. All right. Now let's go to the next one on the list. The next one on the list is the Lady Deathstrike special. Lady Deathstrike's name was too long for Punk to fit on there, so we get Lady Special. But I will tell you, I love this character. And one thing I will say is, this is one thing that I took into account here is this character is fantastic in Doom raids. Now, obviously, eventually they're going to sell us a tech team, but it's great to have a character who's awesome in war and the best war offense team, and is also great in raids. And this ability is her most important ability, and this thing is just awesome. So what this does, a big part of it is just the reduction of speed bar, which can't be resisted. Okay, I love that. But on top of that, and she's getting offense up, so that's going to give her 50% additional, 50% additional damage. But what I love about this is this T4 is you go from 1 bleed to 2, and of course you're going to get the higher damage multiplier on those bleeds, and it's only you're going to use it on turn 1, and it is only a 3-turn cooldown. So you're going to use this one quite a bit, okay? And by the way, if this ability kills somebody, it's going to increase the duration of positive effects. So getting as much damage as you can from this thing is important. So to me, this is just such a key core ability for her. Now, you may say, well, wait, I like Philosopher. You've got why do you have her special over her ultimate? And I got to tell you, I love her ultimate. But here's the thing with the ultimate. In my experience, this is why, to me, you get some experience just from using the team. Like, I don't put these out. Like, some people just put their guesses out as an infographic. I'll give you my thoughts on stream, but I don't put infographic out until I feel good about it. Here's the problem with this one. This ability, I don't usually use until the fight's basically over. Now, maybe 6-8 months from now, this team will be power crept so much that you need to rely on this ability. But right now, like, this ability is not it's not a turn 1 type ability. Okay, you're going to use it further down the line and later in the fight, and it's got a long cooldown, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you're going to use it once in the fight. It's really, really good, but a lot of these are good. I could have had everything as quote essential. But to me, if I'm going to pick one that's essential, I want to pick the turn 1 ability you're using every 3 turns. To me, that's more important. Okay, and going from 1 to 2 bleeds here, very huge. Getting the higher bleed multiplier. A lot of you may say, well, this is not it's not a sexy ability in a certain way. It doesn't do anything super special. But, I will say I think that all this damage from 3 to these number 3, 4, and 5 abilities on this list is just really essential to get the train rolling with this team. You need those bleeds to start ticking because bleeds take turns to do damage. They don't do the damage up front. So to me, having the bleeds on, that are really strong on turn 1 is just really what gets the ball rolling for this team. All right. Next, we have the Lady Deathstrike passive. Okay. Now, I will just tell you, Lady Deathstrike passive to me is, I really debated whether I was overrating this because of how clutch it is in raids. Because I will tell you, in raids, this is just so important for this character. But I think even in war, it's really nice. And it really depends on how strong your Weapon X is. If your Weapon X is as strong as mine, right now in the game where we're at, it's because it's at the top of the meta. You never get to a spot where she's about to die. But I'm trying to think about for any Weapon X, right? Some of you are going to be punching up big with your Weapon X. This is such an important ability for her survivability. On dropping below 60% health gain 2 evade. It's really, really helpful. Otherwise she just gets to death proof. But to me, this gives her, she's almost feels like a cat with 9 lives. They say a cat has 9 lives. She's just so hard to kill. Huge in raids. I mean, I have really, for me now, I actually dislike the mutant nodes more than the tech nodes in Doom 2.3 because my tech team's good and she's part of that. And, it's just she's so hard to kill. Sure, he'll heal her up as long as, and Doc Ock's regens will heal her up as long as she's alive, and she stays alive really well with this ability. So I think this ability is going to be one that particularly is going to stand the test of time with this team as it gets more power crept. That's what we saw with teams like Shadowland, where in the beginning you needed fewer T4s, but over time you needed more, and I think this is going to be one that will increase in value over time. All right, now, number 7, the Omega Red Basic. And I know you're going to be thinking, wait, Philosopher, what the heck, man? Why do we need the Omega Red Basic? Well, this adds an additional health steal. And he's a striker, so this is going to be his ISO attack, okay? So there's that. And I will also tell you that this is just absolutely huge in Dark Dimension 5. And it would be equally huge in Dark Dimension 3 or 4. I mean, this character is ridiculously good in Dark Dimension, and part of the reason why is because of this health steal on every single ability. And so to me, going from stealing 5 to 10% health is worth doing this T4, and especially since he's a striker and you're going to be getting this in the ISO attack. To me, this is just, I don't know why you would not T4 this ability if you have an Omega Red. If you're going to go through all of the work to unlock this character or put all that investment, to me it's a no-brainer. So that's why I've got this on here. Now, as I said, there are definitely arguments about how many essentials you need, and I really debated just chopping it off at 7. And I use the word chop because chop is my favorite ability of Silver Samurai, which I don't even have Silver Samurai ultimate on here, which is his chop ability. But I do have a couple of his other abilities here. And I got to tell you, I really think, at least right now, Silver Samurai may be the least important character in this team. I think over time, as this team becomes more power crept out, then he's going to become more important. But I love the character. He may be the most fun character for me right now in the game. And so I love this chop ability where you're putting out massive damage and you can use it turn 1. But I think in terms of particularly what's going to stand the test of time here, I really like his special. So that's the first one we're going to do here. So this is number 8 is his special. Why? Well, he gets so much survivability here, and the counters are used. We're going to get to that in a minute. So he gains taunt for 2 turns right here. But so this T4 gives him +3 counter, +3 deflect, and he applies defense up to the entire team for 2 turns instead of for 1 turn. Okay, so the defense up is huge. It means that's 50% damage reduction for the whole team. But what I like about the counter and deflect here, and particularly the counter, is if you look at the next ability that I think we should T4, which is his basic. The reason you should T4 this ability is because of the counters. I'm going to talk about these two in conjunction. Is because of the counterattack. I mean, you don't use his basic really, but he's doing all these counterattacks. And with this T4, whenever this character performs a counterattack or assist, they apply 2 bleed to the target. And by the way, he does do assists as well quite a bit. And putting those 2 bleed means that, that also you're going to have with the T4 a higher damage multiplier, right? You have a high damage multiplier on those bleeds. He's going to perform all these counters because of the other ability. And he also does assists. And if you look at his passive, I think he does, where is he? I thought he did assist. Maybe I'm thinking, there you go. Gain 10% assist chance plus 10% for each ally. So he's going to have 50% chance to assist. So that's just more bleeds flying all over the place. You notice a theme here is like bleeds. That's just how the team is designed. And you can, a lot of you are like, I don't know if I want to just T4 an ability that just does have stronger bleeds. Well, to me, the bleeds make this a T4 heavy team. And it also, it means that is to a certain point what makes this team overwhelming. And what makes the difference between a team that's going to struggle and a team that has it easy is having enough of these key abilities T4'd so that you have really hefty bleeds on the early turns. So, here what I see is Wolverine special is turn 1, Sabretooth special, Sabretooth ultimate turn 1, Lady Deathstrike special turn 1. Samurai then could use his special on turn 1 and start countering, or at the very least he's going to be assisting all the time, and having the T4 in the basics going to be more bleeds. That's the thought process here is, other than these 2 key abilities from Omega Red at the beginning, all the rest of this is about getting high bleed damage on the targets. Now, nice to have T4s. Omega Red special is the first one on the list. And I got to say, I really debated whether to even have this here. I mean, in other words, this, in terms of pure value it provides less. But my thought process is Omega Red is going to be the one character in this team that's a standalone. You're going to use him in Dark Dimension. You're going to use him in, in sometimes in Arena and in other places, right? And even sometimes in Doom Raid, you might use him on the Mutant Boss. So to me, this is kind of the standalone character from this group, although you'll use Lady Deathstrike, I suppose, in raids as well. But to me, realistically, particularly given the investment that it took to unlock this character, I just think most people are going to want a T4 all. And this is the only one that I haven't listed so far. And I just think as a practical matter, you're going to want to get everything you can out of him. And this is his turn 1 ability, and he does lots of damage. And so just getting additional damage, I think, is worth doing over abilities that come later. Now, I know some of you may say, well, I really like, the Wolverine ultimate or the Lady Deathstrike ultimate. And from what I've seen, at least at this stage of the game, those, I don't even get to those abilities. I don't even get to them. Or by the time I do, the match is over. Whereas Omega Red Special is the first ability that he uses. So that's my thought process here. So the Wolverine ultimate is the next one here. On paper, that's really awesome. On paper, this is awesome because it applies a second bleed and the higher multiplier. So you go from 1 to 2 bleed, and you get the higher multiplier on the 2 bleeds, and you get 90% piercing. And this is a devastating attack, but how often is this a deciding factor in the match? I mean, to me, this is a win more kind of T4. I have it, and it helps me win more. But I'm just saying, by the time I use this ability, I've already won basically. Same thing. I feel the same way, and I mentioned this earlier about the Lady Deathstrike ultimate. This is a devastating ability, going from 1 bleed to 2, rebound chaining from 3 to 4. I mean, on pure damage output, this is huge. But by the time I get to this, I feel like it's just a win more move. To me, having the early bleeds is really what gets it's done, because you don't get a tick on the bleed until later. So you're not getting, it's not instantaneous damage. So you really want to have those really strong bleeds front loaded to turn the tide in the match. Okay, so that's why they're where they're at. I mean, this is not just purely something I threw together. Okay, this isn't just something like people before they play the team, they just throw together an infographic. And now I have Lady Deathstrike basic next after her ultimate. Well, why the basic? Well, it's really nice. And I have her as a striker. And so that, if primary target has bleed, apply defense down. I mean, this really helps the ISO attack. It's very nice. Is it essential? No. I could have had 10, 12 essentials, but I think a lot of you would admit a lot of you I know have been using this team with less than 7 even, right? Or less than 8. Or so, if you're only getting by with a few T4s, this isn't going to be it, but it's really nice to have. And I think it's exactly right where you want to, throwing out all these defense downs, because let's face it, your primary targets are always going to have bleed with this team, right? Everybody's going to have bleed. So it's just very nice to be throwing out defense down, which of course increases incoming damage by 50%. Okay, so very significant. All right, next we've got, so the next nice to have is the Silver Samurai Ultimate. And this is one of the most fun abilities in the game. I loved when this character came out and unlocked him. I had a lot of fun with this in RTA and just, one-shotting people with this. And in war, it can be fun, but like as a practical matter, I mean, it's a powerful ability in a vacuum because getting these charges what happens is he's got this special charge mechanic. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it here, but with the charges, if he has, let's say, 5 charges on him, which he starts with in war, he gets an additional 200% piercing. Piercing is fantastic because it bypasses armor. That's what piercing is. That's essentially 1,000% piercing. So it just can affect with the T4. So it can effectively one-shot a lot of targets. But in my experience, by the time Silver Samurai, who's only, I think, 100 speed, if I remember correctly. Yep. He's only 100 speed. So he's like super slow at this stage of the game. He's kind of like Black Bolt, Sinister speed. At this stage, by the time he goes, the tide of the match is already turned. And often his ability, at least with my 5 red stars, it's not enough to actually one-shot somebody. So the cool part of this is if you can one-shot somebody, characters killed by this attack can't be revived, which is cool. But I never can kill. By the time in the Heroes for Hire matchup, by the time he goes, it's Luke Cage is taunted usually, and he can't kill Luke Cage. At least at the level that I'm facing, they're too big, and so it's fine. It's interesting. Theoretically, it's important, but in practice, this is why I make these infographics after I've used the team a lot. And I just in practice, this just is more kind of a win more thing. Now, all of this could be different depending on your situation. I'm giving you this information so you can make judgments for yourself. If you have a 7 red star Silver Samurai and you're trying to punch up big with the team, maybe this is going to mean more for you. But generally speaking, in my experience, this has been a win more ability. It comes too late in the fight to turn the tide. It doesn't quite have enough oomph to one shot somebody. It's not like the death pool alt that just one shots anything. So that's been my experience with it. Okay, moving on. Next. So the next nice to have T4 is the Sabretooth special. And this one, this is once again, not a turn 1 ability, not what you're going to use turn 1. You could use it turn 1, okay? You see it there. You could use it turn 1, but you're going to use this one and get the cooldown, started for that. So this one, you get a lot of damage. You get 70% damage plus 20% piercing to the primary target, 40% damage to secondary targets, 80% piercing to all targets instead of 60. So it's just plus 20%, okay? It's not an extra 80%, but it's plus 20% piercing to all targets of Omega Red as an ally. This is all very good, but there's no... This is one of the few attacks in this team that's not a bleed attack. So you don't need it for the additional multiplier there. You're not getting an additional bleed or anything. And it's a turn 2 ability. And so to me, not the priority on this team. Nice to have, sure. That's why it's in the nice to have category. All right. Next, Wolverine passive. Wolverine passive is essentially, your way of making sure that your Wolverine stays alive. So if you look here, this is the healing factor ability. And so essentially on his turn, instead of healing for 20%, 15% of his max health, it heals for 20. And then when the character drops below 60% health, he gains defense up plus 2 death proof, which is very nice, but it's not as good, and it's not as good or as necessary as the Lady Deathstrike ability. In other words, in my experience, the Lady Deathstrike ability, she needs that to stay alive more. She's the more fragile of the 2 characters, in my experience, and getting those 2 evades plus 2 death proofs and all that it does a better job. That's been my experience. I don't feel like you really need this all that much. Okay, so, and I kind of also view her as a more important character for the team. All right, she's got the only semblance of a cleanse on this team for one thing. All right, moving on. So, nice to have though. Wolverine Basic is the next one. So we have already got Wolverine up here, so I'll show you that. And the Wolverine Basic is awfully nice. It's another one in a vacuum, very, very good. You apply a second bleed, not just one, so you have double the bleeds. Plus, you get the higher damage multiplier on the bleed. That's very good. But as a practical matter, I don't really use the basic all that much on him. Now, I will just say, I actually thought about putting this in the you don't even need it category, because you're going to use, what you're going to do is on turn 1, you're going to use this, which I have very high in the list. Then on turn 2, you're going to use this. And so when do you use the basic? I mean, at the very end of the fight. Not very important at all. However, in terms of a nice to have, on a vacuum, it's very nice. On another team, or if he gets moved to a different team in the future, this is going to be very nice. If your team eventually gets power crept or you're doing huge punch ups, this in a very long fight, this could be nice. So I don't have it in the category for that reason, but it's just one above that, and I really considered putting it in that category. He's also, by the way, if you look at the ISO class, I don't have him as a striker, and so therefore, that's not his ISO attack. So if we go to the T4s, it's the basic and passive of Sabretooth. You could potentially put the Wolverine, the last Wolverine one, in this category, but let's go to Sabretooth here for a second, and I'll show you why his basic and passive I don't really think are worth doing. The basic, all it gives you is 40% additional damage. Not that exciting. And the passive, this is something I had done before this team. It only is useful if you're going to be using him in the Marauder team. I mean, I suppose it has some value here because, he does get a 25% chance to assist a non-attack ability. So instead of 15, it's 25%. But how many non-attack abilities are there on Weapon X? I don't even know if there are any. I don't think there are, now that I think about it. So I think they're all just attacks. So, or actually maybe one. I think Silver Samurai Special or something. But I mean, it's just not that important. So, so this is just not even important on this team. And the basics not important on this team. All right, let's talk about some of the other stuff in this infographic. So you may say, wait, Philosopher, why these ISO classes? Somebody told me other ISO classes. I have no idea in this game. A lot of times people just look at a bot to tell them what to do for their ISO classes. So why do I think that these ISO classes make sense? Well, first of all, I really like Raider in general on this team, okay? Because this is a team that is doing tons of chains all over the place, okay? And in fact, it is a team where there's just lots of, essentially attacks flying on all sorts of different characters. So to me, it's really a no-brainer to have, let's say Wolverine and Sabretooth as Raiders, right? So this is, if you look here, for one thing, this is his second one. He's getting extra crit chance. Okay, so you might as well give him additional. This is Wolverine. Now he's getting 100% crit chance on secondary targets. So, and he's attacking potentially 6 targets, or he's attacking 6 different times. So just tons of vulnerables going out. What Raider does is it increases your crit damage as well as your crit chance. So he's just doing tons of extra damage as a Raider. Similarly here, this is a single target one, but so the special I think is the primary one for him. Sabretooth, it's just purely, if you look here, 5 to 6 targets. And then if you look at this one, you're looking at all adjacent targets. So, it's usually you're going to try to hit 3 targets with that one. So to me, I like Raider for both of these. Then Omega Red for a couple of reasons. One is he hits really hard. Okay, you can just see his damage here. But also, I love his ISO attack. Okay, so his ISO attack, you have to actually, they don't show you in the game what the ISO attack is, and that's just something that is I will just say is a problem with this game. They really should show you what the ISO attack is in the game itself. But if we look here, at msf.gg, look how good this ISO attack is. Attack primary target for 194% damage, 15% piercing, and steal 5% health from the primary target. And so this just makes him even better in Dark Dimension, by the way. And then prolong the duration of bleed, slowing offense down on the primary target. And, of course, everybody in the opposing teams can have bleed, right? Very quickly if they're facing Weapon X. So, to me, that's fantastic, okay? Now, if we look at the back here in the list, so you say, well, wait, then why is Lady Deathstrike a striker? Okay, well, if we look at Lady Deathstrike's ISO attack, you're going to see it's also quite good. You know, she is... Oh, she's transferring a deflect. She's attacking the primary target for 200% damage. She's gained plus 15% piercing. You know what? It's interesting. To me, I suppose you could make the argument that she could be a raider as well. But I have always had her I like having the additional damage from her. So that's why I've done it. Obviously increases the damage multiplier on her bleeds. But this is one now, as I think about it, I think I'm in accordance with almost everybody has her as a striker, but she's somebody who could be. Yeah, I think you could very well have her if you want to have her as a raider or a skirmisher. She's the one that, as I go look through it now, I feel the least strongly about her ISO class. We can actually see what people are using, right? Does it show us here? I guess not. It doesn't really matter. All right, let's go back to the infographic. Why is Silver Samurai a skirmisher? That one's much easier for me to explain. Silver Samurai is doing all sorts of counters and assists all the time. So he's just going to be putting vulnerable everywhere. So to me, I actually think, now that I think about it, part of the reason, you have to figure out who do you want to have as your striker. With this team, maybe now I remember the reason why I did it. So between Silver Samurai throwing out all these vulnerables, Wolverine with his 100% chance, Sabretooth thrusting out vulnerables when he crits, you're going to get a lot of vulnerables out there. And so you just need, what I found from testing it is that Omega Red wasn't enough to use them up. And you want to get the maximum value out of these vulnerables. You don't want to just stack up tons of vulnerables. You want to use them. And so I thought that Lady Deathstrike was the best choice. But you could go a different route. You could try to make another character striker, but I think she was the best value of the remaining ones in the group. I think Silver Samurai is definitely a skirmisher. I think Omega Red's definitely a striker. Wolverine and Sabretooth make a lot of sense as a raider, so she was just the obvious choice as striker. All right, let's talk a minute here about positioning and gear priority. Well, let me just say gear priority. To me, Omega Red's the most important character in the team by a country mile. Silver Samurai is the least important. These other three characters, they're more bunched up in the middle. Lady Deathstrike, Sabretooth, and Wolverine. I think Lady Deathstrike's the best character of the group. She's got flexibility outside of the team in raids, so I think that's really important. These two, though, are also important for their damage. Positioning, why do I have this positioning? Well, in my experience, the least survivable character is Lady Deathstrike. The most survivable character is Wolverine. And so what we do is we have Silver Samurai, who's our taunter on one end. The splash damage is going to go into Wolverine, who is healing every turn, and he's got, something when he goes under 60% health where he's going to get death proof and defense up. So he's just very survivable, and Lady Deathstrike is as far away from the action as possible. I originally had Omega Red all the way in the end, but he's so survivable, I don't think he needs to be this far on the other end. Okay, you always want to have sort of your tank on one end and your weakest character on the other end. All right, guys, I know this has been a long video, but I hope you appreciated the thought process that I put into this. I spent a lot of time on this one because this was actually tricky to do. And so I hope you enjoyed the explanation. I hope this helped you build the team. I do have the infographic linked below. And I also have it on my Discord, which is also linked below. If there's ever any updates, I'm going to put that on the Discord. So if you like this video, please smash that like button, subscribe to this channel. It's a free way of just supporting the channel, okay? And you could also, though, if you got comments or questions, you can leave those below or go to the Discord. That's linked below as well. You can also go to my Twitch stream, which is linked below. And if you want to support the channel more than that, particularly supporting Punk, please buy Amazon coins using the link below, not a different link, but the link that is in the description, part of which helps our channel.